This is Dan, and this is the Napkin Academy. Our lesson now is going in detail on 6x6 picture type number 1, which we know is called the portrait. Portrait is what we use to describe visually who and what, and it's the simplest possible picture of a person, a place, or a thing. We might remember when we were looking through our 6 ways of seeing that the first way that our visual system perceived the world around us was by noticing the objects, the things that were in that world. So when we looked at our simple pictures, we noticed that there was a little girl, or we noticed that there was a little dog, or we noticed that there was an airplane, or we noticed that there was a bird. What we were processing there was literally the what pathway, identifying what were the things that we saw in the world around us. What we're going to do in this and the next 5 lessons is go by the pictures in the 6x6 one by one and talk about some key underlying characteristics of each, what makes them the same and what makes them different. So we're starting right now with the picture type called portrait. And let's just draw an example of one. Let's say I wanted to draw you, well, a little bit of a portrait of me. As I'm feeling right now. Okay, there's a little portrait of me. So what does a portrait show? Well, it shows a who or a what. Another way to put that, of course, is a person, a place, or a thing. And for those of us with a bent towards the, I don't know, towards language and terms for that, there's a grammatical term for that. These are really the nouns of our world. That's what we show with a portrait. Now, as we recall, any kind of a picture that we have the ability to look at or create has an underlying coordinate system. So what is the coordinate system? What is the coordinate system of a portrait? Well, it exists, it's just that we don't map it out because it's by default. So we don't need to worry about it too much, but let's go ahead and make it anyway because every picture does have a coordinate system. The coordinate system for most portraits is simply going to be up, down, left, and right, which for a portrait picture is not particularly meaningful, but we're going to find that the underlying coordinate system, we might as well talk about it now because it's going to become increasingly important as we start to go through the other pictures of the 6x6. The next idea I want to talk about is what is the relationship of objects within a portrait? Also pretty simple. The relationship is simply, well, the position relative to each other. I mean, all we mean by that is the relationship of the objects in this picture. My eyes are here, and my mouth is here, and my hair is up here. And so the only relationship between them is very simple, where they are in relation to each other. Not a whole lot there for a portrait, but that will become important with some of our other pictures. And the starting point. How do we start drawing a portrait? Well, my favorite way is to just draw a circle. As always, draw a circle and give it a name. Or if we want to draw a box, draw essentially any one of our initial 5 shapes and just start with that and then, see what grows as we continue to move on with that thing. So let's look at some examples of portraits. Just see if we can't draw, because remember our idea is the simplest possible visual to describe one thing and make sure that it's different from another thing. Simplest possible. So let's just take some examples. If I wanted to draw a couple of circles, I could tell you that this one is a beach ball, And this one is a soccer ball. And this one is a tennis ball. So there we have some very simple portraits showing the differences, the underlying differences between three different kinds of balls. Another kind of portrait, I could say I like airplanes, so let's go ahead and make a portrait of a big airplane. This is what they look like when they fly over my house. And let's compare that to the portrait of a small airplane. This is what they look like when they're putting over my house. And hopefully they don't often want to have this kind of relationship in space to each other. Something else, of course, very simple, using just our most basic elemental shapes. I could say that I'm interested in representing single-family dwellings, or I'm interested perhaps in representing community dwellings. And I want to make a visual comparison between the two. What else could we have for a quick example? Well, one that we've already done quite a few times is just the difference between a happy person, a not so sure person, and a definitely unhappy person. And we can lighten it up even more with just a couple marks by showing. So some different examples of aircraft, different examples of dwellings, and different examples of moods. All the kinds of things that we can show with simple portraits. Now, I want to talk for a moment about when would we use a portrait. Okay, we're talking about applying our pictures in a business setting. So when would we use a portrait? Well, there are a few examples of when we would. When we just simply want to describe an object. Say, for example, we're making a logo type. Well, doesn't it make sense to think that all we need is a very simple portrait to represent a very important who or what? We just make a picture. A little portrait can be very effective at showing the basic underlying visual look of a particular idea. We've drawn lots of windows lately, so let's go ahead and draw a little Microsoft Windows window. So we use a portrait when we simply want to describe a logo type, which in many times is really just a kind of elaboration of a product. So if we simply want to show our product, we can draw a little portrait. We sell this. Maybe someone around the corner sells that. Someone a little further down the line sells something that looks like that. And another company sells that. Now, they're all drinks, but they're very different, and those differences can be made clear through a simple portrait. So when else would we want to use a portrait? Well, whenever we're talking about people. And who talks the most about people in business? Well, human resources. You know, the lifeblood of any business, human resources, and it's talking about people. So we might be able to say, for example, that we're hiring. And we know what kind of people we want. We need people who are real gearheads. We need some serious hardcore engineers. Or maybe perhaps we don't. Maybe we need some real beauty queens. Or maybe we need some other beauty queens who happen to be college graduates. Or maybe we're looking for people of very particular demographic group. We're looking for dual income, no kid customers. Dinks, dual incomes, no kids. Maybe we're looking for some dinks as customers. The point is, we use our portraits to describe the type of people we're thinking of. And by drawing them out, it does a couple of things. Number one, it forces us to be very clear in thinking through, well, who really are we looking for, or who are we targeting, or who do we want to hire? But it also helps us imagine what those people actually look like and begin to think about some of the things that make one different from the other, which of course is so important, back to our business translator, when we start to talk about customer segmentation and targeting and all those other lovely sorts of business and marketing terms. That's where we're really going to come in to using our portraits to help describe things. Let's just summarize things for a moment. Portraits. Picture type number 1 in our 6x6, used of course to describe who's and what's. And I think there's a little, I'm trying to think of a nice visual way to summarize the impact of what we can do with portraits. Oh, here's something. So imagine if we had a peace sign. Anybody remember a good old peace sign? And what our hand's doing, of course, is we're making the, yeah, peace, dude, the peace sign. Well, what happened if in our other hand we had a pair of scissors and we snipped that? We might end up with a very different portrait, one of a very fast car that's going to get us out of here. All right, so just a quick example of what we can do with portraits alone.